Hello, just before I get into the rest of this video, I just want to say I wasn't planning to do this video. I'd just done a video about my mother passing and the anniversary, and then I decided I want to talk about dealing with that. And it wasn't really planned and didn't quite go as I was expecting it to. But I don't want to try and redo it, so I'm just going to leave it as it is, and I just sort of thought I'd say that and just hope you understand. Hello, Steve White, Steve White 39. I just did a video about my mother's death. It's the third anniversary of her death. She died on the night of the 16th December, but I found out the next day, and 17th seems to be the day where we acknowledge it. So, like my sister posted on Facebook a few pictures today, and I did the same. I sort of want to talk about that a bit more because, like I said before, this is kind of my therapy, like making YouTube videos. And I mean, the other video is more about just what happened, and now I just sort of, it's more about how to deal with death. I don't know if I learned anything or not. I mean, I wasn't expecting her to die when she did. I thought I would see her for Christmas and I would either stay with her or I'd go home again, and if she died suddenly I wouldn't be there. But I sort of wasn't sure because I only had found out the night before how sick she was. I just was reading through some messages that my sister wrote the day before she passed. Well, actually, the day she passed, earlier in the day, we were talking, and then she messaged me the next morning at 7 a.m. To say she was gone, but I didn't actually respond until like after lunch. So, I mean, it was difficult because I was planning to see her, obviously. I missed seeing her. I was planning to go on a Friday. I changed it to Tuesday. I was going to stay for 10 or so days. I ended up deciding just a week because I thought a week was just made more sense to go for just a week. And she died on the Sunday. I was planning to travel on the Tuesday. So it was very upsetting not to be able to say goodbye. There were some things I had to talk to her about, and some things I needed to ask her that I never got to because I had to do them in person. I just wanted to ask her more about her life. I wanted to know who she was. Like, you see your parents as just your parents. You don't realise they have a whole life outside of you, especially if you're a narcissistic gay man, as I spent most of my life. And I realised afterwards I don't know who she was as a person before she became a mother. Like, what movies did she watch? Where did her and my dad meet? You know, what was her favourite song when she was growing up? Like, what books did she read? Like, I know very little about her life because mostly you're just talking about your everyday current sort of life with your parents. You sort of, you realise when somebody dies, you lose like a library of knowledge and their life and their experience and everything. And I wish I had spent time talking to her. I'd planned to, but every time I wanted to, or every time I felt like it felt like saying, I'm giving up, you're going to die, so I need to talk to you now. And I knew there'd come a point where it was just unavoidable, because my mum's, she had esophageal cancer, which is very quick, apparently, but she lasted almost 3 years. She was diagnosed in February and died December, like nearly 3 years later. So I sort of was like, well, I need to talk to her. I'm just going to wait until the end and talk to her then, because before that is like acknowledging, because her process seemed to be just deny that it's happening and just not talk about it, just not deal with it, but just not talk about it, not dwell on it. That's, you know, she was from that generation. They didn't talk about anything. They didn't talk about problems. And that's the way she very much was, just, but I put that off, and I regret that the most, because what I realised with my dad and what I realised with my mother is, I mean, people say death is final, but until you feel that finality in reality, it's like this giant steel trapdoor just dropping down, and you just can't get past it. You can't get around it. It's just there, and you really don't realize it until it happens. I mean, if you haven't had someone die, you don't know what I'm talking about. You might think you do, but you don't know. And that's one thing I wanted to say if anyone's listening to this is, do not wait. Talk to people about their lives, what matters to them, who they are. Ask questions. Find out who your parents are. Find out who the people in your life really are. Because once they're gone, they are gone. You can't ask any questions. Like, it sounds stupid to say it, but experiencing it is so much different than just thinking it intellectually and feeling you know it. I've talked to a few people who don't get along with their parents and don't talk to them. I'm like, talk to them. All this rubbish you're fighting about you think is important, the second they are gone, it means almost nothing. I'm sure it depends on how serious the issue is. I didn't have any serious issues with my mother. Dad was a little bit different, but still not really serious. It's not like, he was like an abusive father or something, Some of those people who have to deal with that sort of stuff, it might be different, but all the little things that you worry about, they just mean nothing afterwards. They just mean nothing. And I said to a friend, talk to your father now, because you might think this matters, but when he's gone, you're not going to care about any of this. You're just going to care about the things you don't know that you can't ask. And I'm pretty sure he didn't listen to me, but that's what I've discovered. And I haven't had the easiest time with my mother dying. I mean, I was the youngest child. I was the last child. I was a baby. I was very sick. She mollycoddled me, whatever, quite a lot. I was very much a mama's boy. Even though my brother was just as bad. He was the favourite, but I was the baby, so we both got special treatment. I became aware of mine, though. And I was like the last one to leave, and like the silence, because I was probably the noisiest out of all the kids. The silence when I was gone she kind of noticed it. She wasn't really, there was no ceremony when I left. I just got on a bus and left and I got on the bus to the airport, plane to Melbourne. That was it, gone. And it was a foregone conclusion. I was leaving the second I could. I hated the town I lived in. It was very homophobic. I was going through a lot of abuse, literally assaults and stuff. So I was happy to get out of there as soon as I could and come to the city and have all the experiences I dreamed of, meeting celebrities, hanging out with drag queens and porn stars and gay people, and going to concerts and going to art exhibits and all the things that you get with the city, the life that you have with the city, and I've lived most of that, and I'm glad I left. And I couldn't have really had a gay life there. I mean, Tasmania's fairly progressive now, but it wasn't when I was a kid. And regardless of what state it was in when I left, that's just the way I thought of it, and most people in my area hadn't changed. So we were pretty close. I would go back every Christmas and Easter. For a while I was going back in the middle of the year when I was at uni, but no one else was on holiday. It was winter. It basically just sucked. I was just sitting around by myself in the cold, so I stopped doing that eventually. But I did think of going back when my mum was really sick and using that as an excuse to visit her in the middle of the year, so I wasn't having that long stretch between Christmas and Easter. But I, again, felt like that would be like saying, I'm giving up on you, I think you're going to die. So I'm coming back now when I normally wouldn't. So I didn't do it, and I regret it. I regret not going back for her birthday and Mother's Day. But every time I thought of doing it, it was like saying, I'm giving up on you. And I was afraid of... I don't think she was in denial, but just her way of dealing with it was just like, just go on with the next thing and just, not ignore it, but she just sort of would just keep going. Like when she spoke to her doctors at her last appointment, they were like shocked she was still alive. They joked about it. They were like, I can't believe you're still here, because normally someone her age with the cancer, how it was, wouldn't live as long as she did. She lived almost 3 years with it. I wish she'd lived a few days longer. I wish she'd gotten to Christmas, but she had a much more peaceful death from her heart failure, from just that. She basically just went to sleep watching TV in the hospital bed. She was only supposed to be in hospital for a few days. Her there was problems with her blood. She had to have a transfusion. They waited for the Monday. I don't know why they didn't do it immediately. And she just went to sleep and died in her sleep, basically, like Rose in Titanic. That was one of the only films we ever watched together, like in the cinema. I'm a big movie buff, so we saw 3 films together, I think. But that was a big one, and we saw the documentary, the 3D one as well, that James Cameron did. And I remember when I was telling Mum about that, she's like, I don't want to see 3D, because last time she saw 3D, it was still like, the red and blue glasses from like the 60s or something. So she didn't realise how the technology had improved, and she was quite shocked by, especially the end. If you've seen that film, when they have the ship going down, they've got photos of all the real people who died, like coming out like as objects at you from the screen, and she was quite amazed by it. 3D technology. But we saw Titanic together because she visited a couple of times Melbourne, and we went to I saw you know what, I'm just going to keep them to myself. We saw a couple of films, but I saw one with one friend, and then 2 we saw together because they were sort of big epics. I thought, well, if you're going to see a film on the big screen, because we went to the Astor Theatre, which is kind of special, they show old films, we should see some sort of big epic film. So we saw a big epic film, and then we saw Titanic there as well. Because she hadn't seen it in the cinema, because there was a cinema in the city near us, but there was always too much hassle to really go to. She just watched, TV and DVDs and that. But yeah, I don't know, I just wanted to talk about just grief. Just, it's really like, it hits you at times like that. Every now and again I'll be doing something, and I'll think about something, and it's like that, just boom. Other times you just go long periods of time, and I mean, I heard Dr. Phil once say, it's like one day you will remember the good times first, you'll smile about them, and then remember the sad things. That just the way you sort of process it over time, it does get better, assuming you progress and do things. Like, time itself doesn't heal any wounds, but what you do in that time. And just, there's so many times I'll be thinking about things, and I'll be thinking about how I'll tell Mum about it, because she was the person I always talked to whenever there was just anything. And I always thought of myself as a very independent person. I left home when I was 17. I lived by myself. I was a bit of a loner, but I always sort of was by myself. But I always had her to talk to whenever anything happened, to share, or anything bad. I always had her to talk to, so I was never really alone. And that was the reality of her death, was that now you are actually alone, and realizing that, in life we are alone. We sort of, we're born alone, we die alone, that sort of thing. And that was just you can think you know things, you can think you understand it intellectually. It's not until you actually live it that you realize what that really is like. And not having that person to just call, like, God, just the other day, I opened something I bought ages ago from eBay, and it's something that I'd sort of, a toy I wanted as a kid or something, and I was just looking at it, and I just wanted to, like, tell Mum about it, because I remember when I was a kid wanting it and probably complaining to her that I didn't have it, and just not being able to share stuff with her. And, like, there is no Christmas now. There is no Easter. I don't talk to my family, really. When I left, there was a collective sigh of relief, because I never fit in with my family, and I was just that problem that they just always had to deal with. And what the only probably good thing about my mother dying was they knew they wouldn't have to see me again, because the only reason why I would see them at Christmas and Easter and that was because I'd go to visit Mum, and I was part of the package. They had to invite her and me. Sadly, this didn't last to the end of her life. The last couple of years we had Christmas alone because there was a fight with a family member, and we used to have dinners together, and they started having their own dinners and not inviting Mum or me, because I don't know if they invited her and she wouldn't go without me, or if they didn't invite her because they knew either way, we spent the last couple of Christmas and Easters having our own little dinners. And some people were like, oh, we didn't realise you were alone, we would have invited you. Whatever. Say that after the fact. I'm bitter about stuff. I'm not going to pretend I'm not. And that may not be rational. But as you can see, I haven't really talked about this to anyone, which is why I'm sort of doing my sort of YouTube therapy. But I wasn't expecting to cry about that. I mean, ironically, I was watching some Titanic stuff. I have the rose vinyl porcelain doll, and I have a bunch of her costumes, and I hadn't tried them on the doll, and I was looking at them and I was going to actually try them on the doll, because I had a lot of stuff that I hadn't opened. I sort of turned into one of those collectors who didn't open stuff, and because you don't want to ruin it. And I'm like, for God's sakes, you could die tomorrow, just enjoy them. And I was going to I'm going to have a Titanic day, and I'm going to dress the doll up in all the different outfits. But I was watching that, and I ordered on eBay for like $7 one of those tacky little Heart of the Ocean. It's actually sitting behind me. You can probably see it. It's on the bookshelf now. And I just got it in the mail the other day. It was like $7, $7.95 or something. It's really bad, but the real replica one is like a couple of $100, and I'm going to get that eventually. I just can't really afford it right now. And I was just thinking about Titanic, so I don't know, that just got to me. But that's what grief is like. You will be fine, and then something will remind you of the person, and all of a sudden it's just like yesterday it happened, and it's just boom. And maybe that's because I haven't dealt with it properly, because I haven't, like I said, I haven't had anyone to talk to about this. You can't, like, when I was home, we did talk about Mum and the situation, but you can't put your grief on someone else who's grieving. So it's not like we really were like, it's not like we're like holding each other and crying or anything. At the when we spread her ashes, there was a little bit of that just in the moment, but that's it. And I left, and none of the people I thought were my friends made time for me. I had a couple of weird moments. There was a guy who I had a crush on because he was cute. I always talked to him, and I was told him I thought he was beautiful, and he was really annoyed by me. The day I found out my mother died, it was a Sunday. I would normally go to the Railway Hotel and just meet up with whatever gay people I knew were there at the day. It was sort of a random thing. I'd always be there, so people always knew I'd be there. So I never made any plans with anyone. Like a lot of the things I did, I just would show up because people just expected me to be there. I was just one of those people who was always out. I'm like a scene queen. Always had been for over a decade. And I went with some friends, and they all knew what had happened. But a week or so later, I remember maybe it was the next week, someone came up to me. I just said hello like I always do, just being polite. And he said hello, and then he sort of paused. And I think he remembered seeing on Facebook that my mother had died, and then he gave me a hug. And there was another person who came up to me and said, I saw from Facebook that I sort of knew. We never hooked up or anything, we're just friends. He was friends of a friend sort of thing. And we went to Rebel Heart concert together and stuff like that. He sort of gave me a hug and asked how I was and that. So a few people actually like came up to me and said, oh, how are you? But it was always in a social scene where you couldn't really talk about it. No one sort of contacted me to meet up separately and actually talk to me about this. So I haven't really talked to anyone about any of this. I probably should be going to some sort of grief counselling or some group or something, because I am having trouble without my mother. It's just that simple. I think that's basic for most people because they're such an important person in our life. But if you're someone who has a family, like usually straight people, there's a family, then that family breaks off into its own little families. They have their own families, and then what was the family is then just the parents are then the extended family of the other families. When you're gay, you don't have that family. Your family breaks up, has their own family, and just leaves you behind. And my family hasn't included me in anything. I knew when my mum died, that would be the last, when I went back, that would be the last time I went there, because no one would ask me to Easter, no one would ask me to Christmas. I wouldn't be involved in their lives. I knew that because of how things had been the last few years. And there had been a fight with some relatives, and I had that realisation. I literally went up to my mum. I was saying to them, just after the fight and that, and I actually hugged my mum. I said, when mum is gone, I know that I'm not going to have a family anymore. You guys aren't going to have anything to do with me. And I hugged her because I didn't want to, I was saying when you die, because eventually it's going to happen, but I didn't know if 4 years later she'd have cancer and 7 years later she'd be gone. I expected her to live, at least 10 years longer. When your parents get old, you start to think about that stuff. And because her mother lived to be, I think, I thought my mum would live till 90, basically. She didn't get to 80. She was 79 and a few months. Her birthday was a few months later, so she didn't get to her birthday. But the year before, I thought that was going to be her last birthday, so I wanted to go back for her birthday. But I don't know. I just want to talk about this. I need to talk about this. I don't have anyone to talk about with this. I don't have any friends close enough to talk about something like this. I have a couple who are in another state, people who I was friends with when I was a child in high school, but they have their own lives, and we talk online, stuff like that. I can't really talk to them like face to face. They both visited me when I was home at my mum's place. I was such a mess, I couldn't even make a cup of coffee. It took about 15 minutes for me to make it because I was out of it. And that's how I spent most of the time. I was at my mum's place. I was just in a bit of a shock. I was just in shock. And I spent the whole time. I had the theme song, Mother's Theme from Jerry Goldsmith's soundtrack for Psycho 2. It's actually a very beautiful piece of music. I had that on repeat just for like a week. The whole time I was sorting out my stuff because I was staying at my mum's place, and it had been sort of left up to me to pack up most of her stuff for all the family to come and get the stuff that they wanted to keep of hers. My sister had started it, but then she stopped it when I was there and assumed I would want to wait. They sort of were going to wait till I left to finish it. And I said, no, I'd rather do it now while I'm here, so it'll give me something to do. And then they just left it for me to do by myself, which is not what I meant. It was too much of a job for one person. It was exhausting. And I literally didn't sleep a couple of nights because I was just trying to get stuff done and I couldn't sleep. And I woke up on the floor of my mum's room because I basically passed out and didn't know how I got there. Eventually I got things done by the morning that someone had just decided this is the morning everyone's going to come and get everything. And no one really talked about it, and I haven't really talked about it with my family since. I really only have talked to one of my sisters a little bit. And she's more emotional than me, so I can't talk about my problems because you really need to speak to someone outside of your family. You really need to speak to someone separate, someone who can be sympathetic but doesn't have the trauma as well that you're, traumatizing them by talking about your grief. So I realised I should be speaking to someone about this. I haven't, and I think I'm going to try and join some sort of group, but Corona Zone, until the vaccine comes out, I'm not really going to do anything that I don't absolutely have to. If I have to go to the post office to pick up something, like, once I've got a few weeks, I think they'll hold stuff for about a month. If anything, like, that's it. I'll go across the road the post office to pick up something if I've ordered it, and that's it, because I ordered some clothes and stuff and they're taking forever. But that's pretty much all I've done. If I had to go to the doctors for something serious, I probably would, but I'm not planning to leave my house until March, when they start giving out the vaccinations. So obviously speaking to a therapist is not going to happen. They're not cheap. Finding them who deal with men appropriately, because there's a lot of sexism there, and it's just a mess. But I don't know. I'm just waffling now. I wanted to talk about this. I wanted to talk about grief. I thought it might help someone to hear my story and my experience, and it just helps to just verbalize it, because until you talk about it, it's just in your head and how you feel about it, and talking about it actually makes a difference. And that's why you should talk to people. You should talk to a therapist. You should talk to someone if you're going through this. Don't go through it alone. It'll make it worse and longer. And I've been living with that the last few years because I haven't had anyone to deal with this about. And I spend a lot of time by myself because my emotional energy is so low. I can't deal with any drama with people. And a lot of times I'm just like, I can't deal with it, and I just don't deal with things. A lot of issues with dealing with grief, and I don't have any of the answers. I'm just sharing my experience and telling anyone who's listening, don't deal with it by yourself. Speak to someone, and not necessarily someone in your family, because not only are they going through their own grief, but they also can't be objective about some things. And sometimes you need someone from outside your family to tell you that's wrong, that shouldn't happen. We have these dynamics in our families that dictate how people react to things, and often it's not what you need. So I guess that's just what I want to say. I just wanted to talk about my experience, and maybe if someone listens to it who's just gone through this, it might help them to decide to actually speak to someone like I should have, and probably will in the near future. I've seen TV shows and movies where people have groups that they talk about, and it's like losing someone to cancer or something like that, and I was imagining something like that, but no one introduced me to anything. I didn't come across anything. I looked briefly, I couldn't find anything, certainly not in my area, and I just sort of thought I can deal with this. And it's just weird, because my mother lived in another state. I can't believe I've talked this long. Because my mother lived in another state and I would only see her a couple of times a year, I think in my mind she's still in Tasmania, and life hasn't really changed. My day-to-day life hasn't changed, except I don't call her. So it's only when I sort of think to call her that I sort of feel like she's gone. The rest of the time I feel like she's still back, and her ashes are on top of Mount George. She's looking over the town. She's looking over my family that lives there. But I don't know. I just wanted to talk about this, and I have. I'll probably make a couple more videos in time. I want to make a video about my father. I want to make a video about just some issues. Thinking about this, some issues came up. I'm like, I want to talk about each of those things separately. But I'm going to try and keep it shorter next time. But I'm going to go. Feel free to share, like, comment, subscribe. If you think someone might actually get something out of this, please share it. Otherwise, just thank you for listening. If you ever had a counsellor or therapy, they basically just sit and nod. So I just imagine out in the audience, you're like sitting and nodding, and that's all I need at the moment. But I'm going to look into something more. But thanks. Bye.